it's good to have you here tonight. There's a strange moment right before sleep, when the edges of things begin to soften. The room seems to widen. Time loosens its grip and stops keeping its usual pace. And the part of you that has felt like a solid, separate self all day quietly begins to blur, until you can no longer say exactly where you end and the dark around you begins. Something in you seems to dissolve. Where does it go? Let your eyes close and feel the boundaries of your body grow faint. You are drifting toward the edge where the self gently comes undone. Welcome to Sleepy Science Facts. Tonight we sit with a gentle mystery. Why does your sense of self seem to melt into something boundless the very moment you begin to fall asleep? We will follow what science genuinely understands about this feeling. The quieting brain, the fading senses, the softening edges of who you are. And then, near the end, we will pause at one strange and much debated question that a few physicists have raised at its far edge. Let's begin where the feeling itself begins. As you begin to drift tonight, notice that falling asleep is not a single switch flipping off. It is a slow doorway, and for a minute or two, you pass through a state scientists call sleep onset. Your eyes have closed, yet you are not quite gone. The room grows distant. Your thoughts start to loosen from their usual order. And something quiet happens at this threshold. Your sense of where you end and the world begins starts to soften. That gentle loosening sits underneath everything we explore tonight. And it raises one simple question. Why does your sense of self seem to dissolve into something boundless the very moment you start to fall asleep? Sleep researchers call this first doorway stage N1, the lightest stage of sleep. It usually lasts only a few minutes, a brief bridge between being awake and being fully asleep. If someone woke you here, you might insist you were never asleep at all. Your muscles ease. Your breathing slows. Your eyes begin to roll gently beneath their closed lids. On a brain scan, the fast rhythms of waking start to fade, replaced by slower, rounder waves. N1 is the shortest stage of the night, yet it is the one where the strange, floating feelings of falling asleep are born. Tonight, you will move through it more than once. One of the first things to change is how much of the world reaches you. As you sink toward sleep, a deep brain structure called the thalamus begins to quiet. During the day, the thalamus works like a busy relay station, passing sights, sounds, and touches up to the thinking part of your brain. At sleep onset, it starts closing its gates. Sounds grow muffled. The weight of your body fades from notice. The outside world does not vanish, but it thins, like a voice heard through a wall. And as the flood of sensation slows, your mind is left with a rare and open quiet. It does not often meet while awake. When the outside world grows faint, your mind does not simply go blank. It begins to fill the quiet on its own. With fewer signals arriving from your eyes and ears, the brain's inner activity rises to the surface. Faint images bloom behind your closed lids. Stray thoughts drift loose and wander. This is why the moments before sleep can feel so oddly alive, even as your body lets go. Researchers see it as the mind turning inward, no longer busy sorting the outside, free to drift through its own quiet rooms. What you meet there is not nothing. It is the private theater that opens whenever the world steps back. Behind your closed eyes, faint shapes often begin to appear. Soft blooms of color, drifting geometric patterns, slow-moving lights. These are called hypnagogic images, and nearly everyone sees some version of them on the way to sleep. They are not dreams, exactly, and they are not memories. They arrive unbidden, shifting and dissolving before you can hold them. Some people see swirling tunnels or gentle grids. Others watch landscapes form and melt away. The images ask nothing of you and mean nothing in particular. They are simply your visual brain, idling quietly, painting the dark with whatever it finds. You are not making them on purpose. They rise on their own, the way ripples cross still water. Sometimes a face appears in that inner dark, calm and unfamiliar, then gently fades. Other times you catch a phrase, a few words spoken in your own mind that make little sense. These are hypnagogic voices and faces, and they can feel surprising the first time you notice them. Yet they are a normal part of falling asleep. Your brain, drifting between waking and sleep, stitches together fragments of sound and image with no story to hold them. A stranger's face, a nonsense sentence, a snatch of music. None of it needs to mean anything. It is the mind loosening its grip on order, letting pieces float free before the deeper tides of sleep carry them off. Your brain waves shift in a measurable way as you cross into sleep. While awake and alert, your brain hums with quick, small waves. As you relax and begin to drift, slower waves called theta rhythms rise, cycling roughly 4 to 7 times each second. Theta waves are the signature of that in-between state, the electrical texture of a mind letting go. They wash across the brain in gentle, rolling patterns. Scientists can watch them appear on a scan and know, almost to the second, when someone has slipped past the edge of waking. These slow waves are not a sign of something wrong. They are the calm rhythm of a brain gliding down toward rest. Just as you settle, your whole body may suddenly jolt, as if you missed a step on a stair. This is a hypnic jerk, a quick, harmless muscle twitch that catches many people at sleep onset. Often it comes with a vivid flash of falling. Scientists are not fully certain why it happens. One idea is that as your muscles go slack, a watchful part of the brain misreads the letting go as a real fall and throws out a reflex to catch you. Notice what it reveals. Even as you drift, some corner of you is still tracking the edge between holding on and letting go. That very edge is where the dissolving feeling begins. Somewhere in this drift, your body may stop feeling like a fixed, familiar shape. you might feel yourself grow large, or sink, or float an inch above the bed. Limbs can seem to swell, shrink, or drift out of place. This is the loosening of what scientists call your body schema, the brain's inner map of where your body is and how big it is. All day, that map is quietly redrawn from the steady stream of signals in your muscles and skin. As those signals fade at sleep onset, the map goes soft at its edges. Without fresh information, the brain stops being certain where you end. And so, gently, your outline begins to blur. The sense that you are floating or expanding is not a flaw or a warning. It is what happens when the brain briefly loses track of your body's borders. A region near the top of your head, the parietal cortex, weaves touch, balance, and position into the steady feeling of owning a body. At sleep onset, its signals grow faint and uneven. With the borders no longer sharply drawn, your body can feel weightless, oversized, or oddly far away. People have described sinking through the mattress or swelling to fill the room. Nothing has gone wrong. The map is simply resting. And for a moment, you get to feel what it is like to have no clear edges at all. Time loses its ordinary shape as you cross towards sleep. A few minutes can feel like a long while, or the last stretch before sleep can vanish with no sense of passing at all. In waking life, your brain keeps a loose running clock, stitched from attention, memory, and the steady rhythm of events. At sleep onset, those threads come loose. Attention scatters. New moments stop being firmly recorded. Without them, the felt sense of time thins and drifts. This is why you can look at the clock, close your eyes, and open them an hour later with no memory of the gap. Time did not stop. Your mind simply stopped keeping such careful track of it. The firm line between you and the room grows faint at sleep onset. While awake, your brain holds a clear divide, an inside self and an outside world, and updates it moment by moment. As sleep approaches and sensations dim, that divide is harder to maintain. The boundary that usually feels solid begins to soften, like a shoreline blurring in fog. You may feel less like a separate self behind your eyes and more like a quiet field of awareness with no fixed center. This softening is not a loss of yourself. It is the mind easing its constant work of drawing lines. For a little while, you are allowed to stop holding the edge in place. Tiny fragments of dreaming can flicker through this early stage, long before deep dreams arrive. Scientists call them dreamlets or micro-dreams, brief scenes that surface and dissolve within seconds. You might find yourself walking a path, hearing a conversation, or watching a small event unfold, then blink back to the edge of waking. These fragments are shorter and looser than the dreams of later sleep. They have no plot to follow and rarely any thread of self. They are the mind rehearsing the act of dreaming, testing the waters before the deeper dive. Each one rises whole, hangs for a breath, and drops away. And each shows how easily your waking mind slips its moorings when you let it. More than a century ago, scientists first gave this twilight state a name. In the 1800s, the French researcher Alfred Maury coined the word hypnagogic, from Greek roots meaning leading into sleep. He spent years watching his own mind slide toward rest, noting the images and voices that rose along the way. Decades later, another French scholar, Eugene Leroy, gathered detailed accounts of these sleep onset visions and studied them closely. Long before brain scans existed, these careful observers understood that falling asleep was not an empty gap. It was a rich and shifting landscape worth mapping. The strangeness you feel tonight has been noticed, named, and quietly studied for well over 100 years. Whatever you did over and over during the day can return as you fall asleep. In a well-known study, people who spent hours playing the falling block game Tetris saw those blocks tumbling behind their closed eyes at sleep onset. Even patients who could form no new memories and did not recall playing still saw the falling shapes. Scientists call this the Tetris effect. When you repeat an activity long enough, your brain replays its patterns in the doorway to sleep. Skiers see slopus. Hikers feel the trail, still moving beneath them. It is a sign of your mind sorting and settling the day, weaving fresh experience into the quiet as you begin to let go. Falling asleep is not one clean moment, but a gradual, patchy fade. Modern research shows that sleep can arrive in different parts of the brain at slightly different times. One region may slip into slow, sleeping rhythms, while a neighbor still flickers with waking activity. Scientists call this local sleep. It helps explain why the edge of sleep feels so blurred and strange. Part of you has already let go, while another part is still half listening to the room. You are, for a few minutes, genuinely between two states at once. This is why sleep onset can feel less like a wall and more like a tide, coming in unevenly across the shore of your mind. As attention let go, your thinking changes shape. During the day, thought tends to move in orderly lines, one idea leading sensibly to the next. At sleep onset, that tidy order loosens. Ideas begin to leap sideways, linking things that waking logic would keep apart. Scientists describe this as hyper-associative thinking, and it is one reason the edge of sleep feels so dreamlike. A word summons a color. A memory melts into a stranger's face. The mind's usual editor steps back and lets loose connections form. This drifting, associative state is not confusion. It is your brain relaxing its grip on control, following gentle threads wherever they lead, the way a boat drifts once the oars are set down. Inventors have long guarded this fertile edge of sleep. Thomas Edison is said to have napped holding steel balls in his hands, so that as he drifted off and his grip loosened, the clatter of the balls falling would wake him with fresh ideas in mind. The painter Salvador Dali used a similar trick with a key and a plate. Modern scientists have tested the idea and found something real in it. In one study, people nudged awake soon after sleep onset were far better at solving a hidden puzzle. The doorway to sleep, it seems, is also a doorway to insight, a place where the loosened mind can stumble onto answers that careful daytime effort kept just out of reach. You might hear things that no one else can as you drift towards sleep. Your own name, softly spoken. A snatch of music. A doorbell. A knock. A voice calling from another room. None of it real. These are auditory hypnagogic experiences, and they are common and harmless. Some people even hear a single loud sound, like a bang or a crash, with no source at all. A curious event scientists call exploding head syndrome, despite its alarming name. All of it comes from the same place. A brain hovering between waking and sleep, weaving stray signals into fleeting sound. Your ears are quiet. The room is still. The sounds are made entirely of a mind letting go. Deep in your brain, a quiet chemistry helps carry you across. As you settle towards sleep, calming messengers spread through the brain, gently lowering the activity of the regions that keep you alert. The parts that handle sights and sounds grow less responsive. The networks that hold your attention loosen their hold. This is not the brain shutting down, but the brain shifting gears, easing from the sharp focus of waking into the soft, wide-open state of sleep. Each system stands down in its own time, which is why the crossing feels gradual and layered. Little by little, the machinery that keeps you sharply here begins to rest, and the borders it maintains rest along with it. Nearly everyone who sleeps passes through this strange, shimmering doorway. Surveys find that most people, given the chance to notice, report the drifting images, the floating sensations, the odd fragments of sound at sleep onset. You may have assumed these feelings were yours alone, too fleeting or too odd to mention. They are not. They are a shared human experience, woven into the same nightly crossing every mind makes. The passing face, the sense of falling, the softening of your own edges. These belong to all of us. Whatever you meet tonight in that in-between place, countless others have met something like it. Quietly, in the dark, on their own way down into sleep. The feeling that yourself is loosening can be gentle or a little unsettling, and both are normal. As the brain's borders soften, some people sense a warm, spreading calm, while others feel briefly unmoored, unsure where they stop and the room begins. This resembles what scientists call ego dissolution, a temporary easing of the strong, everyday sense of being a separate self. At sleep onset, it is mild and passing, a natural loosening rather than anything to fear. The tight knot of you, held firm all day, is simply being untied for the night. If it feels strange, that is only because you so rarely let yourself come this far undone while still awake enough to notice. That vast, open sensation, the feeling of becoming boundless, has a quiet mechanism beneath it. When the brain stops receiving clear signals about your body's edges and stops firmly dividing inside from outside, there is nothing left to mark where you end. With no border being drawn, awareness can feel as though it spreads without limit. The infinite feeling is not a trick of mood. It is what a mind feels like when it briefly stops fencing itself in. And here the question we began with turns slightly. Perhaps your self does not dissolve into something boundless so much as it simply stops holding its own shape. And what remains is the openness that was always underneath. Why does the mind feel infinite instead of merely blurry at this threshold? Part of the answer is that your brain builds the very sense of having limits. The feeling of being contained, of sitting behind your eyes within a bounded body, is something the brain actively constructs. Moment by moment, from a constant stream of signals. When that construction pauses at sleep onset, the limits it drew do not simply smudge. They lift. And with them, gone. Awareness is left without walls. What you feel in that moment is not emptiness, but spaciousness. The natural openness of a mind that has, just briefly, set down the work of defining its own borders. So return to the question you carried into this hour. Why does your sense of self seem to dissolve into something boundless as you fall asleep? Tonight, the first answer is clear and grounded. Your body's map goes quiet. The line between inside and outside softens. Time loosens. Images drift. And the brain sets down its steady work of holding you in a fixed and separate shape. What feels like dissolving is really a letting go, the mind easing open as it releases the day. And yet, a deeper question waits just past this one. A question about what that opening might truly be touching, which is where the hours ahead will gently lead. For now, let the question rest in the dark and simply feel where you are. Notice the soft weight of your body loosening its outline, the room growing distant and kind. There is nothing here to hold on to and nothing to solve. The edges you keep so carefully all day are allowed to blur now, and you are allowed to let them. Somewhere in this quiet, the boundless feeling is already beginning, not as something you make, but as something you finally stop preventing. Stay here a moment longer. When you are ready, we will drift on together, a little deeper into the science of this gentle undoing. If these quiet crossings into sleep are something you would like to keep returning to, this is the kind of place that comes back to them, night after night. For now, though, nothing is required of you. Let your breathing slow, soften your hold on the day, and let the next hour carry you the rest of the way down. There is a network in your brain that switches on whenever you think about yourself. Scientists call it the default mode network, a set of regions running along the midline of the brain that grows active in quiet moments. When you replay a memory, imagine tomorrow, or wonder what someone thinks of you, this network hums. It is the machinery behind the feeling of being a continuous person, the narrator threading your days together into one story. For most of your waking life, it runs in the background, so steadily that you never notice it working. Tonight, as you settle, it is already beginning to loosen its grip. Your sense of I is not stored in one single place. Instead, the default mode network stitches it together from scattered parts, pulling autobiographical memory, self-image, and imagined futures into a single, seamless thread. Brain imaging shows these midline regions lighting up together whenever attention turns inward, away from the outside world. The self you carry feels solid, like a fixed object you were born holding. Yet what the scans reveal is closer to an ongoing performance, assembled fresh moment by moment. You are not finding yourself somewhere in there. Your brain is quietly building it and rebuilding it every waking second. As you drift towards sleep, this self-making network begins to quiet. Studies tracking brain activity across the transition into sleep find that the default mode network loosens its tight coordination, its regions no longer firing in the same synchronized chorus. The inner narrator softens mid-sentence. Thoughts about who you are, what you must do, how the day went, grow thinner and further apart. This is not a malfunction. It is the orderly stand-down of a system that has been running all day long. And as it powers down, the familiar boundary drawn around you starts, very gently, to lose its sharp and certain edge. Consider the possibility that the self is something your brain does, not something it has. Neuroscientists increasingly describe the self as a process rather than a thing, a verb wearing the costume of a noun. There is no single cell, no small chamber, where you are kept in storage. Instead, the feeling of being someone emerges from many systems working together in real time. When they cooperate, the sense of a unified self appears effortless and whole. When they loosen, as they do near sleep, that unity can soften and thin. The self was never a fixed stone. It was always closer to a flame. You actually carry two selves, and researchers separate them carefully. One is the narrative self, the story you tell about who you are across time, built largely by the default mode network. The other is the minimal self, the bare sense of being here, right now, behind your eyes. In ordinary waking life, the two blend so smoothly they feel like one. But they can come apart. As the storytelling self quiets towards sleep, the narrative loosens first, while the simple sense of presence lingers a little longer. What dissolves at the edge of sleep is mostly the story, not the quiet awareness beneath it. Your brain does not passively receive the world. Under the predictive processing view, it is constantly guessing what comes next, then correcting those guesses against the signals arriving from your senses. Your sense of self is one of these predictions, a stable model the brain maintains to explain the steady stream of sensation coming from one particular body. This self-model is usually held firmly in place by a flood of input from your eyes, ears, skin, and organs. It is less a discovery than a best explanation, updated continuously. and like any explanation, it holds only as long as the evidence keeps arriving to support it. When you lie still in the dark, the evidence begins to thin. Your eyes are closed. Sounds fade. Your body grows quiet and warm, and the stream of sensation feeding your self-model slows to a trickle. With less input arriving, the brain has less to anchor its prediction of where you end and the world begins. The tightly held boundary of me has fewer signals holding it in shape. This is part of why the edge of sleep can feel strangely expansive. The self-model has not been attacked. It is simply relaxing, for lack of anything pressing to keep defining. Deep in your brain sits a small region that helps decide where your body ends. The temporoparietal junction, where the temporal and parietal lobes meet, blends signals from vision, touch, balance, and position into a single, felt sense of a bounded body. It is a large part of why you feel located behind your eyes, inside your skin, and nowhere else. When its activity shifts, that certainty can waver. In rare cases, disrupting this region has been shown to trigger the eerie sense of leaving one's own body. The line between you and the room, it turns out, is drawn by a patch of tissue doing quiet arithmetic. Scientists can loosen your body's boundary in just a few minutes with a simple trick. In the rubber hand illusion, a fake hand is stroked in plain view while your hidden real hand is stroked at the same time. Within moments, many people begin to feel the rubber hand as their own. The brain, weighing sight against touch, quietly redraws the border of the body around a piece of plastic. This gentle experiment reveals something profound. The felt edge of you is not fixed hardware, but a live estimate, recalculated from whatever the senses report. Change the input, and the boundary of your body politely moves. Much of your sense of being a self comes from within, not from the outside world. Interoception is the brain's reading of your internal state, the faint drum of your heartbeat, the slow rhythm of breathing, the quiet tone of your gut. Researchers find that this steady inner signal helps stitch together the feeling of being a single, located self. It is a background hum you rarely hear on purpose. As you fall asleep and attention turns away from the body, that hum recedes further from awareness. With the inner signal softened, one more thread anchoring you to a particular body loosens its hold. Think of the ordinary feeling that you are the author of your own actions. Neuroscientists call it the sense of agency, the quiet conviction that you moved your hand because you chose to. It is not given to you for free. The brain constructs it by comparing what you intended with what your body actually did, then labeling the matching movements as yours. This sense, too, can loosen. As you drift towards sleep, thoughts and images can begin to arrive on their own, unbidden, without the feeling that you are steering them. The author steps back, and the mind begins to move by itself, quietly, without you. Long before brain scanners existed, deep meditators described the self simply melting away. Now researchers can watch it happen. inexperienced meditators reporting states of ego dissolution. Imaging often shows reduced activity and connectivity in the very default mode network that builds the sense of self. The boundary between inner and outer softens, and the practitioner describes feeling merged with something larger than a single person. This is not mysticism dressed up as science. It is the same self-making machinery going quiet, on purpose, in daylight. What monks reach through years of practice? Your tired brain approaches on its own each night, at the threshold of sleep. There is a strange borderland you cross every single night, and it has a name. Hypnagogia is the state between waking and sleep, where thoughts turn to drifting images, floating shapes, half-heard voices, gentle sensations of falling. Researchers study it as a window onto a loosening mind. In this zone, the ordinary rules relax. The firm line between your thoughts and the world grows porous, and inner images can feel almost as real as things seen. Your self-model is coming untethered, softly, without alarm. Many people pass through this territory each night and remember none of it, mistaking the whole slow dissolve for simply nodding off. Notice what remains when the story of you goes quiet. Even as the narrative self-loosens and the body's boundaries blur, something usually stays. Abare, contentless sense of presence, of experience still happening. Researchers who study minimal awareness suggest this thin thread of being can persist even as the fuller self dissolves. It asks for nothing, defends no borders, tells no story. It simply is. This may be part of why the edge of sleep can feel less like vanishing and more like widening, like a small room whose walls have quietly been removed. What is left is not nothing. It is openness. Step back and see what the night has been quietly showing. Piece by piece, the machinery that builds yourself has been standing down. The narrator, the body's borders, the sense of steering, all loosening at once. The question that opened this hour begins to turn. Perhaps the self does not dissolve into something infinite because you reach out and touch the infinite. Perhaps it feels boundless simply because the walls that once made it feel small have, for a little while, come down. What that widening truly is, and how far it might reach, is a question the coming hours will carry gently further. There is nothing here you need to hold on to. Let the edges of you stay soft, and let the self keep loosening on its own, the way it already knows how. There is a question about your own mind that no scientist has yet been able to answer. It is called the hard problem of consciousness, named by the philosopher David Chalmers in the 1990s. We can describe what the brain does, cell by cell, signal by signal. What we cannot explain is why any of it feels like something from the inside. Why does electrical activity in soft tissue produce the private sense of being you? Here, now, tonight. As you drift, that feeling grows quiet and wide. And the truth is, no one fully knows why it exists at all. Scientists sometimes divide the study of the mind into easy problems and one hard one. The easy problems are not simple, but they are solvable in principle. How you focus attention, how you sort memory, how you wake and sleep. Each is a matter of mechanism, and neuroscience is steadily mapping them. The hard problem is different in kind. It asks why all that mechanism is accompanied by experience, by the felt texture of a thought. You can explain every step of falling asleep and still not touch the question of why it feels like anything. That gap is where tonight quietly rests. Consider what happens when you name the color you are seeing. A researcher can trace the light, the eye, the nerve, the region of cortex that lights up. Yet, somewhere between the firing cells and your inner sense of the color, something remains unaccounted for. Philosophers call this the explanatory gap, first described by Joseph Levine in the 1980s. We can correlate brain states with experiences with growing precision. What we cannot yet do is show why one produces the other. As your mind softens towards sleep, that same unexplained bridge is carrying you across. None of this means science is lost in the dark. Over the last few decades, researchers have found what they call the neural correlates of consciousness, patterns of brain activity that reliably accompany awareness. When you slip towards sleep, these patterns shift in measurable ways. Certain long-range signals between brain regions begin to fade. Instruments can watch it happen. Much about your mind is genuinely understood, mapped, and confirmed. The point is narrower and stranger than mystery for its own sake. We can see the machinery move. We simply cannot yet say why the movement is felt. Part of what makes this so hard is that experience cannot be observed from outside. A scientist can measure your heartbeat, your brain waves, the oxygen in your blood. But no instrument can look directly at what it is like to be you. The only report of your inner world comes from you, in words, after the fact. This is why studying consciousness resists the usual tools. Everything else in nature can be watched by someone else. Your experience can only be lived. As you lie here, the one witness to this quiet dissolving is the very self that is dissolving. The moment you are drifting through right now has a name: the hypnagogic state, the threshold between waking and sleep. In it, the ordinary edges of the self grow soft. People report floating, expanding, losing track of where the body ends. On an EEG, this transition shows up as slowing rhythms and brief bursts of activity. Science can chart the electrical shift with real precision. What it cannot yet explain is the feeling that comes with it. The sense that you are quietly widening past your own outline. The measurement and the experience do not fully meet. Your sense of being a single, bounded self is not a fixed fact. It is something the brain builds. That same self-story network we met earlier, the default network, keeps a running story of who you are. As you fall asleep, that network loosens its grip, and the storyteller grows quiet. This much researchers can observe What remains unexplained is why the loosening feels the way it does. Not like a light switching off, but like an edge dissolving outward into something larger. The self you are letting go of tonight was always, in part, a construction. And still, no one can say why its release feels boundless. It is worth pausing on how honest science is willing to be here. At the very center of the mind, the fact that there is an inside at all, sits a plain admission. We do not know. This is not a failure. It is the edge of current understanding, marked clearly rather than papered over. Many of the deepest questions in physics and biology once sat in exactly this place before answers came. For now, the origin of experience remains genuinely open. And there is a strange comfort in that. The thing you are made of is still, in part, a mystery to the ones who study it. Faced with a question this stubborn, a small number of scientists have asked an unusual thing. Could the physics of the very small play any part in consciousness? Most researchers doubt it, and say so firmly. But a few, including the physicist Roger Penrose and the anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, have proposed that quantum processes inside brain cells might somehow be involved. The idea is controversial, unproven, and rejected by many experts who note how fragile quantum effects are in warm, wet tissue. It is not an answer. It is a question at the far, disputed edge of science, raised, honestly, because the ordinary explanations have not yet closed the gap. So the question you came in with has quietly turned. You began by wondering why your sense of self dissolves into something infinite the moment you start to fall asleep. Now you can see that the honest answer runs deeper than a tidy explanation. The dissolving is real and measurable at its edges. Yet why it feels boundless touches the one thing science has not solved. A handful of physicists wonder whether the answer hides somewhere very small and very strange. Most remain unconvinced. Tonight we do not need to settle it. We only need to sit, awake and dissolving, at the exact place where knowing runs out. Let your breath go long and slow for a moment. There is a tension in what we have just touched, the sense that you are widening past your own edges, and that no one can fully explain it. You do not have to solve it. You are allowed to feel yourself loosening without understanding why, the way you have on every night of your life. Nothing here asks for your effort. Notice how the not knowing softens rather than frightens. How the mystery makes room for you instead of shutting you out. Stay a little longer, and let these open questions carry you gently onward. Deep beneath the chemistry of any living cell lies a stranger layer of physics. In the quantum world, the smallest things, electrons, atoms, tiny bundles of energy, do not behave like the objects you can hold. Before anything measures them, they can exist in a blur of possibilities at once, a condition physicists call superposition. A particle need not be simply here or there. It can be a mixture of both. It sounds impossible, yet careful experiments have confirmed it for a century. Tonight, this quiet strangeness is where a much larger question gently begins. Coherence is the word for when these delicate possibilities stay in step with one another, moving together like instruments tuned to the same note. While a system holds its coherence, its quantum blur stays intact, and it can do things ordinary matter cannot. But coherence is famously fragile. The moment a quantum system touches its warm, busy surroundings, the blur collapses into ordinary certainty. This unraveling is called decoherence, and it usually happens almost unimaginably fast. Holding coherence, for scientists, is a little like balancing a single snowflake on a candle flame. To keep a quantum state coherent, laboratories go to extraordinary lengths. They chill their equipment to near absolute zero, seal it inside vacuums, and shield it from the faintest stray vibration. Warmth, moisture, and motion are the enemies of coherence, because every small jostle counts as a kind of measurement that collapses the blur. This is why quantum computers are so hard to build, and why they must be kept colder than the depths of space. Keep that difficulty in mind, gently, because your brain is very nearly the opposite of that silent, frozen quiet. Inside your skull, conditions could hardly be less quantum-friendly. Your brain is warm, close to 98 degrees, soaked in salty fluid, and humming with constant electrical and chemical traffic. Billions of cells jostle and fire every second of the day and night. To most physicists, this is precisely the kind of warm, wet, electrically noisy place where quantum coherence should vanish in an instant. That single fact sits at the very heart of tonight's debate. It is the reason most scientists stay cautious about any story that places quantum magic inside your thinking mind. And yet a small number of thinkers have wondered anyway. What if some sliver of quantum behavior did survive in the brain? And what if it had something to do with awareness itself? This idea is not mainstream, and it is important to say so plainly. But it has been proposed seriously by a few respected figures. The best-known version is called OR, O-R, and it grew from an unlikely partnership between a famous mathematical physicist and a doctor who puts people to sleep for surgery. The physicist, Roger Penrose, who later shared a Nobel Prize for his work on black holes, suspected that human insight could not be explained by ordinary computing alone. The anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff spent his career watching consciousness switch off under anesthesia and wondered where, exactly, it lived. In the 1990s, the two combined their hunches into a single hypothesis. It remains, to this day, a minority view. Most of their colleagues are unconvinced, and both men have long acknowledged just how speculative their proposal really is. At the center of their idea sit microtubules, tiny hollow tubes that form part of the skeleton inside every cell, including your neurons. Microtubules are entirely real and well studied. They give cells their shape, help them divide, and act like internal railways moving materials around. That much is settled biology. What Penrose and Hameroff proposed goes far beyond this. They suggested microtubules might also host fragile quantum states. That extra step is where mainstream science parts ways with them, and where honest doubt quietly begins. Penrose added a second, even bolder idea, one drawn from gravity rather than biology. He proposed that a quantum blur cannot grow forever, and that at some threshold it collapses on its own, without any observer, in an event he called objective reduction. In his picture, each such collapse might be a faint flicker of raw experience, in a way even physicists find hard to picture. Stitch many flickers together inside microtubules, orchestrated across the brain, and you might, he imagined, get a stream of consciousness. It is an elegant thought. It is also, so far, entirely unproven. Put those pieces together and you have the full name: orchestrated objective reduction, shortened to ORCH. Orchestrated, because microtubules would tune and coordinate the process. Objective, because the collapse would happen by itself, built into the fabric of reality. It is one of the very few theories that tries to link the physics of the very small directly to the feeling of being aware. That soaring ambition is part of why it fascinates people. It is also why the burden of proof resting upon it is so enormous. In the year 2000, the physicist Max Tegmark put the idea to a hard test. He calculated how long a delicate quantum state could possibly last inside the brain's warmth and wetness before decoherence destroyed it. His answer was crushing, something like a tiny fraction of a billionth of a second. Yet the brain signals unfold over thousandths of a second, millions of times slower. If Tegmark is right, any quantum blur would collapse long before it could ever shape a single thought. Let that number settle for a moment. A fraction of a billionth of a second, set against the slow beat of a single thought. There is nothing here to work out. Just let it drift past and breathe. That calculation became the central objection, and for most scientists, it settles the matter. The gap between how briefly coherence could last and how slowly neurons work is simply too vast to bridge. Because of this, the great majority of physicists and neuroscientists doubt that OR describes anything real. It is widely regarded as a fascinating long shot rather than an accepted explanation. When you hear that quantum effects run your mind, the honest reply is that most experts firmly disagree. Supporters of the idea have not simply surrendered. Penrose and Hameroff argue that microtubules might shelter quantum states better than Tegmark assumed, perhaps shielded within ordered water or protected structures that slow decoherence down. Critics remain unpersuaded, noting that no one has shown such shielding actually works inside a living brain. This back and forth is how science is supposed to sound. A claim, a hard objection, a careful reply, and still no settled proof. For now, the objection is winning, and the honest verdict stays open but doubtful. Here the story turns, gently, toward something firmer. There is a real and respected field called quantum biology, and it shows that life does sometimes use quantum tricks. This does not rescue or, and it is important not to blur the two together. But it does explain why the underlying question is not absurd to ask. In a few specific, well-studied cases, living things appear to borrow the strange rules of the very small. Those cases are worth knowing before we weigh what they do and do not prove. Consider the leaf outside your window. When it captures sunlight, energy must travel through a maze of molecules to reach the place where it is stored. Some experiments suggest this energy briefly explores several paths at once, in a quantum-like way, helping it move with notable efficiency. Researchers still argue about how large and how important this effect truly is. But photosynthesis shows that warm, living systems can, at least sometimes, brush against quantum behavior. It is a real clue, though a modest and much debated one. Even more curious are certain birds. The European robin seems to sense Earth's magnetic field to steer its long migrations, and the leading explanation is beautifully strange. Light entering the bird's eye may create pairs of electrons whose quantum states respond to magnetism, giving the bird a kind of compass it can almost see. And here the question quietly shifts. It is no longer whether life ever touches this hidden layer, but whether your own mind, softening at the edge of sleep, could brush it too. That door stays open tonight, though what waits behind it is very far from decided. Still, honesty asks for a firm line here. Photosynthesis and birds are not evidence for quantum consciousness, and no serious researcher claims they are. They involve simple reactions, over tiny distances, for fleeting instants, doing narrow jobs. Awareness is something vastly larger and slower, spread across the whole living brain. Showing that a robin's eye borrows a quantum trick tells us almost nothing about whether your sense of self does. The gap between a bird's compass and a conscious mind remains immense, and it is only right to say so. In recent years, a few experiments have nudged the microtubule idea back into conversation. Some researchers noticed that the gases used to switch off consciousness during surgery seem to act partly on microtubules, the very structures OR points to. If the off switch of awareness touches these tiny tubes, they reasoned, perhaps the tubes matter more than we assumed. It is a genuinely interesting thread. It is also a long way from showing that anything quantum, or anything conscious, is happening inside them. One study, reported in 2024, found that a drug which binds to microtubules made rats take noticeably longer to fall unconscious under anesthesia. To some, this hinted that microtubules play a real role in switching awareness on and off. It is a careful, suggestive result, and worth watching closely. But a delay in anesthesia is not a glimpse of quantum consciousness. There are many ordinary ways microtubules could matter without any quantum blur at all. The finding opens a question. It does not close one. Another line of work has explored how the building blocks of microtubules handle light, hinting that they might pass energy along in unusually coordinated ways. A few physicists have wondered whether such effects could, in principle, help fragile states last a little longer than expected. The measurements are early, done mostly on isolated molecules rather than living brains. Even the researchers themselves describe them as first steps, suggestive at most. They are the faint beginning of a possibility, not a confirmation of one, and that distinction matters enormously tonight. Seat side by side, the picture becomes clear and calm. On one side stands a powerful objection. The brain is far too warm and busy for quantum states to survive. On the other stand a handful of early, intriguing experiments and a small group of thoughtful proponents. The weight of evidence still rests firmly with the skeptics. Or is not a discovery. It is a hypothesis, and a contested one. Knowing exactly where a question stands is its own kind of peace, even when the answer is not yet in. So does this quantum puzzle explain the boundless feeling you meet as you fall asleep? Almost certainly not. At least, not in any strong sense. That melting of the self has solid, ordinary explanations in the brain, the ones we followed together earlier tonight. The quieting of your senses, the loosening of the networks that hold your self-image together. These are enough to account for the feeling. The quantum question is a separate, deeper mystery about the nature of awareness itself, not the cause of tonight's soft dissolving. Even so, there is something fitting in letting the two sit near each other. Both point at the same tender edge, the place where the solid, separate self seems less solid than it feels by day. Science can already explain why that edge softens as you drift off. What it cannot yet say is what awareness fundamentally is, or whether physics, in some form we barely grasp, reaches all the way down into it. To feel that boundary blur, and to wonder honestly about it, is no small thing. It is worth remembering that not knowing is not the same as being lost. Every real science began as a question no one could yet answer. The people who study consciousness today mostly agree that it is one of the hardest questions there is, and they hold their uncertainty without embarrassment. You are allowed to do exactly the same. You can find the mystery of your own mind beautiful without needing it solved, and let the unanswered part of it rock you gently rather than keep you awake. Whatever the final answer turns out to be, the wondering itself is deeply human. Every mind that has ever drifted towards sleep has crossed this same softening border, and many have felt the same quiet awe you feel now. The greatest physicists and the most ordinary dreamer meet at exactly this edge, equally unsure, equally amazed. You are not alone in asking where the self goes when it loosens. It is one of the oldest questions our shared, curious kind has ever carried into the dark. Let your breath slow, and notice how little you have to hold on to right now. Somewhere beneath thought, in structures far too small to picture, the physics of you carries on without instruction, as it does in every living thing. as it has since long before you had a name. You do not need to understand it to belong to it. Feel the edge of yourself grow soft and generous, and let the question we have been holding stay open, warm, and close, just a little longer. Here is where the night's thinking gathers into one honest thought. When your sense of self dissolves into something that feels infinite at the edge of sleep, that feeling has real explanations in the quieting brain. And yet the deepest question beneath it is still unanswered. A very few physicists suspect that the strange rules of the very small might, one day, prove to touch the edge of consciousness itself. Most doubt it, and the evidence remains thin. But it stays a genuine, open possibility, not a truth to believe tonight, only a wonder to carry with you into the dark. By now, science has shown you something gentle about that dissolving feeling. It is not a malfunction, and it is not a warning. As you drift off, that same self-story network we met before, the one that keeps a running story of you, begins to quiet. The sense of a firm, separate self softens because the machinery that maintains it is simply resting. The feeling is real, and it is safe. Researchers have found that your sense of being a single, bounded self is not a fixed object, but an ongoing activity, something the brain keeps building, moment by moment. When that building slows near sleep, the edges blur. Nothing is breaking. You are only watching a construction relax for the night, the way a busy room grows quiet once everyone stops speaking at once, and the noise settles into a soft and easy hush. Deep in the center of your brain sits the thalamus, a kind of gate for the senses. As you fall asleep, it slowly stops passing along the steady stream of signals from the outside world. Without that stream, your brain has less and less information about where your body ends and the room begins. The boundary does not break. It just stops being redrawn, and softly, quietly fades. Your brain keeps a living map of your body, stitched together from touch, pressure, and the position of your limbs. As sleep approaches, those signals grow faint, and the map loosens at its edges. This is why you may feel as if you are floating, expanding, or losing track of your hands. The felt edge of you was always drawn by the brain, and now it is gently setting the pencil down. There is a region where your brain decides, I am here, inside this body, where the temporal and parietal lobes meet. When its activity shifts, people report feeling larger than their body, or spread through the room. As you fall asleep, this same region quiets. The sense of being locked into one small place loosens, and for a moment you may feel as wide as the dark itself. That drifting, boundless state has a name: Hypnagogia, the doorway between waking and sleep. In it, people often feel weightless, or as though the mind has grown vast and open. Sleep scientists consider this ordinary and healthy, a natural stage everyone passes through each night. The strangeness you feel is not yours alone. It is a room every human mind walks through on the way to rest. Every person who has ever fallen asleep has crossed this same threshold. Billions of minds, night after night, feel the self grow quiet and the edges melt away. The experience feels utterly private, yet it may be the most shared thing we do. Whatever is happening in you tonight has happened in nearly every human being who ever lived. You are, in this, in very good company. Long before brain scanners existed, meditators described a feeling of boundless openness, of the self dissolving into something wider. Modern imaging shows that in these states, the same self-tracking networks grow quiet, much as they do at sleep onset. Different doorways, similar view. The sense of melting into something vast is one the human brain seems built to find, gently, from more than one direction. Here is something worth holding lightly. You do not have to explain a feeling in order to be allowed to rest in it. The softening of your edges each night is one of the most peaceful things your brain does. You can simply let it happen. There is nothing to solve in this moment. Only a wide, quiet openness to sink into, the way warm water holds you without being asked. During the day, your brain works hard to keep a firm sense of who and where you are. It is effortful, constant, and largely invisible to you. Sleep is partly a release of that effort. The dissolving you feel is the mind finally allowed to stop holding its own shape so tightly. You are not losing yourself. You are letting a tired hand, at last, unclench and open. Even as the sense of self softens, your brain quietly keeps you. Through the night it sorts memories, files the day, and holds the thread of who you are so that it is waiting when you wake. The self that dissolves at the edge of sleep is not erased, only set down for safekeeping. You can let go completely, trusting that you will still be there in the morning. Science can trace much of this. The quieting networks, the fading senses, the loosening map of the body. But there is a deeper question it has not answered: how any of this brain activity becomes an inner feeling at all. Researchers call it the hard problem of consciousness. Standing here, at the edge of sleep, you are also standing at the very edge of what science knows. It can be strangely comforting that not everything is explained. The feeling of boundlessness you meet tonight touches a mystery that some of the finest minds are still turning over. You are not required to understand it. Few things worth feeling are ever fully understood. You are allowed to simply stand at that edge and let the not knowing be soft rather than frightening. At the very frontier of this question, a small number of physicists have wondered something bold: whether the strange rules of the quantum world might somehow touch the edge of consciousness itself. It is not accepted science. Most researchers are doubtful, and no experiment has confirmed it. But it is a real and honest question, asked carefully by serious people at the outer boundary of what we can measure. The best-known version of this idea comes from physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, who proposed that tiny structures inside neurons might host quantum effects. Many scientists disagree, pointing out how fragile such effects are in a warm and noisy organ like the brain. And yet, whether or not they are ever proven right, the boundless feeling you have tonight remains entirely real. The wonder does not wait on the verdict. Critics raise a fair point. Quantum effects usually vanish almost instantly in anything this warm and this active. And the brain is both. This is why the idea stays unproven and openly debated. Yet notice something. The softening you feel tonight is safe and real on its own, needing nothing from the debate to hold you. The physics may take a century to resolve. The peace of dissolving is here with you right now, gentle and steady, whatever the answer turns out to be. And here is the honest, beautiful part. Whether the universe is quantum strange at the root of the mind, or whether the feeling comes entirely from quieting brain networks, the sense of infinity you touch at sleep's edge is genuinely yours. It is not a trick to see through. It is a real experience, felt by a real mind, worth meeting with wonder rather than suspicion. The vastness you are sinking into tonight is a welcoming place, not a strange one. That is perhaps the gentlest gift of all. The scientists can keep working. The debate can continue for years. None of it asks anything of you in this hour. Your only task, if it is even a task, is to let yourself drift, and to let the openness hold you kindly instead of keeping you awake. Let the well-established science be your ground. The dissolving is your brain resting, your senses softening, your body's map loosening for the night. All of it is normal, healthy, and safe. On top of that steady ground, the open questions can float harmlessly. Like clouds, you do not need to reach. You can feel the wonder precisely because the floor beneath it is firm and kind. A quiet beauty lives in this. Your mind, folded into a few pounds of tissue, is able to feel as wide as the night sky. Whether that feeling is chemistry or something stranger, it means you carry within you the capacity for boundlessness. You do not have to travel anywhere to touch it. It arrives on its own, each night, as you begin to let go. Think of the dissolving not as something taken from you, but as a returning. All day you hold a tight, bright outline of yourself. At night, that outline is allowed to soften back into something quieter and more open. The state you rest in before the morning draws you sharp again. It is less like disappearing and more like exhaling after holding your breath too long. Letting go completely is safe here. Your breathing will continue without you managing it. Your heart will keep its slow, steady rhythm. The parts of your brain that keep you alive never sleep, even when the sense of you grows faint. You can release the whole weight of being someone, and trust that everything essential will go on holding you through the night. Maybe the deepest comfort is this: the wonder itself is enough. You do not need a final theory to be moved by the strangeness of feeling infinite as you fall asleep. Wonder does not require answers, only openness. And you have that openness right now, in the softening dark, as the day's hard shape of you begins, gently and safely, to come undone. As the last of the day loosens its hold, notice how little you have to do. The dissolving is not something happening to you. It is something you are finally allowed to permit. The vastness you feel is not a place you can fall out of. It is wide and warm, and it holds you the way the night sky holds the stars. You are safe inside it. So where does the self go? The moment you begin to fall asleep, perhaps it does not go anywhere at all. Perhaps it simply opens, widening past its daytime edges into something soft and boundless, and then gently home again by morning. Whatever the answer, this quiet opening is already yours to sink into. Tonight, let yourself dissolve into that quiet infinity. It is real, it is yours, and it is enough. Just let go. The night has carried you all the way to its softest edge. You learn that the network holding your sense of self simply quiets as you drift, and that a small gate deep in your brain stops redrawing the line between you and the dark. Somewhere in the last stretch of this hour, the dissolving stopped feeling strange and began to feel like a returning. The same gentle threshold every sleeping mind has always crossed. You came here wondering where the self goes at the edge of sleep. You leave knowing you never had to answer that, only to trust the softening and to let the wonder be enough. If this hour helped that boundless feeling turn from strange to safe, you might leave a quiet word below, or share it with someone who lies awake, feeling their own edges dissolve. It may help them rest, too. These slow journeys through the sleeping mind will keep unfolding here, whenever you need them. Feel the edges of your body grow faint now, one soft boundary at a time. The line between you and the dark is already fading, just as it was always meant to. Let your entire being dissolve into that wide, quiet openness, the boundless feeling that has been waiting at the far edge of sleep. There is nothing left to hold, nothing left to solve. Only this gentle vastness, and you, coming softly undone inside it. The vastness you have dissolved into is the same dark that will hold you all night long, asking nothing of you now. Let your breath slow on its own, each exhale a little longer than the last, carrying you deeper. Let yourself sink into sleep the way the day sinks into night, without effort, without needing to know where you end. These journeys into the sleeping mind have been quietly gathering the strange and gentle truths of how you let go. And the next one carries this further, waiting whenever you are ready. And if your eyes have already closed, simply stay there, wide and safe in the soft dark. Rest now, quiet one. The boundless feeling was always yours, and it was always enough. Sleep well, and let the wonder carry you gently down. Good night.